All right, thank you for joining us for episode 3 of Zoom In, Women Making Impacts on Vancouver Island. In this episode, we've got the wonderful Sonnet L'Abbé. Thank you for joining us and Happy New Year. Yeah, so we're going to have a more extensive bio posted below the video, but I'll just say a little bit about your wonderful contributions to this world. So you're a professor of English and creative writing at VIU, and you were born in Toronto, and you've lived throughout Canada and also abroad. You're an award-winning poet of 3 poetry collections, including most recently 2019 collection, Shakespeare's Sonnets. And in this book, I think you occupy 154 of Shakespeare's sonnets with your own words, and you insert your own experiences, and you address a range of issues practicing the technique of erasure, including mixed race experience, settler colonialism, gender identity, sexual assault, love, pop culture, all kinds of things. It's an incredible book. I've read it page cover to cover, highly recommend it. And you've won several awards and nominated for several awards as well. You've been a community organizer of women's marches and actions and Black Lives Matter marches and so much more. So I'm sure it'll come out in our interview. So thank you for taking the time in your very busy schedule right now for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. So I'm going to just jump right into that first question. And one of the reasons I reached out to you to ask you to participate in this is I think that you're making an impact in a range of ways in Nanaimo, and you have abroad outside of Nanaimo as well. And I'm just wondering if you can share with us sources of inspiration for you or things that have been impactful for you and sort of helping you along in this very amazing and beautiful and complicated, messy world that we live in.
Sources of inspiration for like right now, COVID times, or generally? Are you asking?
Why don't we start with COVID times and then and move back if you want to?
Well, I guess for COVID, meditation and artists whose message embraces both the dark and the light, right? But with a sense of equanimity towards life. Those kinds of messages really have been really helping me. I've been doing a ton of meditation and a ton of walking through COVID, and like I found there's the guy who's in Wu-Tang Clan. I want to say KRZ, and I can't believe that I can't remember the letters of his name, but like his work is a blend of hip hop and like meditative guidance. And then for my teaching, I found there's a woman who's a meditation teacher and edited the anthology of like the Great Black North, and so does poetry, spoken word poetry about Black experience in Canada, but then is also a meditation teacher. So those people who have combined their activism and their portrayal of Black experience with a kind of spiritual practice that's about acceptance, but also resilience and meeting things as they come. That's been sustaining me lately. It's been really good.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you see, can I just ask a follow-up question then? So you're finding that there's this sort of engagement with so-called mind, body, and spirit as being kind of a necessary thing in this time that we're living in right now?
Totally. I mean, I thought it was something I was doing before, and it is something that I was doing before, but the way that lockdown has compelled me to be more conscious about that, like more disciplined in the sense of like, I feel like my balance and when I say my balance, I mean mental health. Like
Mm-hmm.
it could start rolling down a hill of with the isolation and the pressures of work, and like it, it's precarious, right? Mental health is something. Erin Moray, who's a great Canadian poet, posted this thing that she said she had on her fridge for 25 years that said mental health is an intersection.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not a destination. It's this crossroads of balancing these four things, and that you maintain it by doing these, like a kindness and then something for yourself. And it had this quadrant. I think that maintenance is something that I wasn't doing with as much, like Sonnet is precious. We need to take care of Sonnet energy. And now I have, and it's been good. I don't want to be like COVID was great for me, but it's been good to understand what needs to be taken care of and how to take care of it. And also it's given me a different perspective on how my artistic practice throughout my life has been a practice that's meant to do that. And I feel like there's just a little piece missing that I didn't quite understand about self-care, that now I can integrate into the practice, and hopefully it'll be more sustaining for me. And also the ways that my messages, or the ways that my thoughts are articulated to people will be more helpful for the community too, right?
On that note, I mean, I feel like you've been really generous to share that energy with the community, because like not only have you been involved in organizing say Women's March in the past, but Black Lives Matter actions this summer, but also, you know, you've been working on being a musician in the last couple of years, performing live when we could at local destinations, but also sharing your music live through live sessions, right? During lockdown periods in particular. And to me, I think that's super powerful, because you kind of like shared a certain kind of vulnerability. You've laid bare sort of a creative process in motion. And I think, you know, at night, because from what I understand, from what I've seen, you've often started live shows at night. Kind of sometimes when those moments when people are feeling like they might need to hear a voice kind of crying out in the wilderness, you know what I mean? So I think I appreciate the way you've done, and that we've done that and shared part of your journey in all of this. So I'm wondering if you might talk a little more about whether you see a direct connection between your academic and your creative processes in relationship to activism. And as I said, you know, you've been really conscientious around organizing events here in Nanaimo that focus on racial justice too.
Well, so as far as activism goes, like I never set out to be an activist, right? And I hadn't defined myself. I'm happy to like receive that label and be like, yeah, the work that I do translates, like that word defines somebody who does the kinds of things that I've done. But I just think I'm a sensitive like I'm a, you know, a sensitive person that had a lot of feelings, and that the experiences that continue to inform some of my most intense feelings that need expression are around racialized experience, and so the things that I do in response are out of proportion to my feelings. Like I was thinking about you'd sent some questions before the interview, just having me think about a few things, and so thinking about like childhood experiences and stuff, right? So I'll come back, I'll try to circle back to like your question about activism and voice. One thing that I was thinking about and have been thinking about is, okay, so doing the music now, doing the music now, here's poetry in my life, and then and here's like childhood. And here there was music, right? I taught myself piano, and music was a place to kind of just go, and I just loved, I don't know, I just love figuring it out. I was a real math kid too. Like I love the physics of it, like the waves and the proportions. I love all that shit. And then there were like a lot of adverse experiences, and then like had to go like abandon music in part, actually very directly because of some of those adverse experiences. Had poetry, which I now feel is a kind of, is a kind of musical practice. And then to like later come back into music has made me go like, for me, it's about like, I think it's been about the music. And my childhood experience that I was thinking of was I babysat for my piano teacher. So I would have been, I don't know, maybe 11, 12. And I didn't take piano lessons for that long at that point. I taught myself for a while, and so was still in the discovery stage. And I thought I had done the worst thing, because I looked on her record shelf and took out records and like put a record on, and she had not told me that I could touch her records, but I did that. And I put on, I think it was Beethoven's Pathétique, or it might have been a symphony that I hadn't heard before. And I had a God experience. I listened to it, and I was like, oh, I'd had like these sort of, I am a consciousness in a body experience before as a child too. Like, okay, I've arrived on this planet, and like my consciousness experiences itself here through this body. How is that working? Before. So this was like, all right, so we're made of particles, and somehow the particles are animated, and somehow we can hear that vibrations do this. And then we invent this to like give us sensations that are pleasant. Like, and then the sensations remind us that we are particles that vibrate. Like, I was just like, it is God. It is, this is the expression of our divinity, was my feeling in that house where I was babysitting. And then I felt like I had totally, like, couldn't tell her that I had touched her records. But it's experiences like that now that I think, okay, like there are a lot of people who've been through the same kind of racialized experiences that I have, and worse, and and adverse experiences that I have. So what turns somebody into someone who makes art out of them may not be those adverse experiences. It may be just like that particular human's need and desire to express how much togetherness, like we are together, we are here on the planet, and like isn't it amazing? And it's like, but yeah, this race business is really getting in the way of all my like togetherness. Right? And so in some perhaps like unskillful ways, interpersonally, as a lot of people who've had adverse experiences can probably vibe with, sometimes you spend a lot of time being like, you should be like this, we have to change this, and try to change other people, try to change the outside world, instead of like kind of figuring out how to survive inward. And I think that beautiful things can come from that. I think action can happen from that. For me, I think there's a little bit of both. There's been a little bit of like, in my activism, and kind of reacting to things and getting and expressing upset and expressing fears and anger in good ways, productive ways, and maybe, balance of good and bad that way. So like, I think that's what I'm doing creatively. I think I'm trying to bring people, without having realized it at first, or for a long time, people might have said, your work is coming from your activism. right? Whereas I really feel like music is about my joy and about just being here and wanting to share that. And that until I was able to heal a bunch of like harder stuff, that kind of dried out, like that was kind of pushed, narrowed into like, the only music is your voice, and you just get to speak it. And the only emotional experiences I'm in touch with was the, you know, the anger and like the fear, and like, let's talk about these things that nobody talks about, because people not talking about shit really gets me. Like, like a suppression of voices really agitates me. And it produced the energy for a lot of work. I wrote poetry in order to talk about things that needed to be talked about, that I thought needed to be talked about, and that other people seem to agree do, and to alleviate anxiety and to feel to try to make order out of chaos. And so the teaching, I mean, I took a PhD first and foremost to be able to teach poetry and creative writing, and I knew that an English degree would really support that. And so I like to be able to help other people also into other people's work, to help them engage with it. That's
That's, oh, I feel like I just went on a trip there, with like a spiritual trip with that. Thank you so much. Can I guess one thing I'm curious then about, I hadn't planned this question, but is this issue like form and content, that question of like, I think it's been expressed before, certain concerns about only reading creative writers of color through the lens of politics, right? That we need to also at least equally observe the writer's craft and the actual form and all of that. And I'm just wondering, do you have any kind of thoughts on that, and whether there's a distinction, or if they're intimately interlinked, or because I wonder if there's some folks that might read you as and focus mainly on the politics, right? Or others who might appreciate the form, or hopefully a blend of the two. I'm just wondering where you sit on that in terms of form and content relationships.
I'm big into form, for sure. Forms fascinate me. That's why. And my sense of I think form is political. So to be able to discuss form as though it's like removed from politics, it doesn't make sense to me. And at the same time, when I'm teaching a class that's a diverse class, or a not so diverse class that doesn't have any people of color in it except me, I know what it means to teach a sentence structure, like craft, in the sense of, this is the English language, which is our agreed template for how we communicate with each other, imposed by the colonial system, but still is like, it's what we've been trained in. So it's a shared, like, kind of a shared agreement, or at least it's our shared tool. And I teach from that perspective, no matter what background my students have, to say, well, this is the soup we're swimming in. We speak English, therefore, here's what a grammatically correct sentence looks like. And it's only because cognitively you want your reader to be able to parse all of the particular meanings that you might want them to come up with. And so that's why form is interesting to me. And as far as me, like being read through politics versus being read through form, I knew, well, when I started writing this last book, it was like, it was before Black Lives Matter, and it was before Idle No More. It was like those things were just starting. And the wave that we're seeing now of people searching out writers of color, Black writers, Indigenous writers, for their voices was not the case for like most of my coming up. For most of my coming up, talking about your racializedness was a way to push yourself into a niche of topic that other human beings did not find relevant to them.
Right.
Unmarked human beings were just like, this isn't about me. And so form and a demonstration of, like a hyper demonstration of the virtuosity or I don't even like to use word virtuosity, but a hyper demonstration of like meta attention to language that is was what white men who didn't have to or didn't feel like exploring their identity was something that needed to happen, that doing that was the cost of entry into being part of the conversation. And I still think that's somewhat true. I have found that it's white men mainly who've talked about the formal approach, and like as far as people who've written about my work, and then writers of color, Black writers, Indigenous writers who've talked to me about the embodied experience, and talked to me about the politics. There have been a couple of like really, really satisfying, juicy conversations with some women of color, non-binary people of color, who want to talk about how they express their experience through form.
And I think that's such an important contribution of Shakespeare's sonnets, right? Like you refuse to just make it about content, even though that would be amazing in and of itself. Like in and of itself, it's so clear that form is political, as you've said, right? And I think as a white instructor of literary texts, that's something, I initially gravitated to the politics that come out of protest literature, and have come to realize over the years how important form is, and to come back to those formalist things to look at and appreciate in relationship to those things. So I think that your book is going to clearly be something people will be able to talk about for so long in that regard. So with mood and humor, I'm just going to shift a little bit to a song that you wrote recently, Nanzanin, right? I think if you listen to it, there's humor, there's love, and there's critique. And I really appreciate those changes in tone. At least that's what I get from it. I tend to gravitate towards being a critique, and I'm reminded by artists like you of the importance of humor as well, and the importance of love, and how all of that can be blended together with critique. So you were commissioned, from my understanding, to write a song or write a response in service of the Reimagine Nanaimo campaign, and you wrote this song, and you ended up performing it at the Port Theatre, hopefully one day in front of a live audience. But at the time, of course, given COVID times, it was recorded there, and it's available for people to see in various ways online, but through the city of Nanaimo as well. I'm just wondering if you can share a little bit about that writing process. It's yet another direct contribution to the local scene that kind of really draws on a lot of, I think, that you've worked on in the past. And just, tell us about that process and how you feel about releasing it into the world.
Great. It felt great. It was
awesome.
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, when folks at the city, Julie Bevan at the city approached me, they would have known, Julie would have known me from my book, and when I launched at the art gallery, and I've done some work with the local Nanaimo art gallery. So she would have known me from there and contacted me. She may have been open to a poem, and because it feels fairly recent, but it's now been about two years, a little bit more than 2 years, that I've been doing the music stuff. I asked if I could write a song, and she was like, yes. So then what I had to sit with was, what would I say as one Nanaimo resident, right? That I would like to see for Nanaimo, or I would like to have Nanaimo think about. And so, I mean, I thought more diversity, especially at the kind of like young professional level. We've got diversity at the university a lot from international students, and the way that like diverse and international intersect a little bit too heavily, like to me a little bit too heavily in the imagination and the vibe, is something, yeah, just like Canadian born Black people, Canadian born brown people, we're here, and just as boring in a way, right? Like just as Canadianly boring and around would be nice. And so I tried to think of what kind of, how can I say that? Like, I mean, you can say that, that's not particular, but how can you say that artistically? And how could I say that in a way that might actually just touch the emotions, rather than it be one mixed race Black person of color's voice being like, we need more people like me, and it just sounds like the political thing that you always hear. Yeah, so it just felt like a rhetorical challenge. Can I make it touching, or like make it so that somebody else lives the kind of experience that humanizes that desire that seems political maybe from the outside. And so when I told people that I was moving here, before I moved here, I mentioned it to some people who grew up on the island, and like their first reaction was like, whoa, do you know how redneck it is? Like, these are people who grew up here, right? Not brown people trying to diss the town, people trying to like let me in on what I was, what to prepare myself for. So, and I have to say, like, let me just be clear that Nanaimo has been a very accepting, loving, wonderful place that I've had great relationships. Well, that shows up in the song. Like, I have had great relationships here. So I just worked with that. I thought, okay, like everybody can relate to like people thinking of moving here, and there are the reasons why we love it here. And maybe not everybody has had the same experience of having to ask a few deeper questions about this place. And also, like, when I think about some of the literature that is being read now, and some of the things that you hear from like having Black Twitter being a thing, or Indigenous Twitter being a thing, is that white folks getting to hear conversations between people of color, or between Black people, is what this moment and like social media has allowed us to have. So I recreated that, right? I recreated a conversation between two Black people, with a lot of love, I hope. And yeah, and then I tried to pick a name that had some NAs in it, like Nanaimo. Like, I went through, I was like, okay, I need a Muslim woman's name that's gonna make the hook for this song. Like, that's the poetry mind behind that.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't realize that, and I hadn't read anything about that. That's I didn't know that. That's cool. I definitely, that intimacy of your choice of it being a conversation and between two black women, or two Black folks, is definitely a powerful mode. And that is a really, I don't really have much to say about it. It's going to be something I'll be thinking about, but that whole point about the public conversation that doesn't involve a white person, right? Weighing in or learning or like directly teaching, but like not being part of the conversation, like just actually being positioned in a way that they listen, and they're lucky to have access to listen to that. And wow, yeah, so that's interesting, really super interesting. I have to think about that a lot more. I was gonna say that there's two lines that I just wanted to kind of pick up on from the song. You sing that Black boys and girls are, that you hope that Black girls, boys and girls are okay in school. And I'm just wondering about, if we're reimagining Nanaimo and we're thinking about the future of Nanaimo, I'm just thinking about like, what do you think it takes for people to thrive here? If these women or this person was bringing their children here, you know, we want them hopefully to just be okay, be more than okay in school, right? You point to emotions like the importance of joy, and we hear about things like thriving, right? And I'm just wondering, like, to be better than okay, what does it take, do you think, in a place like Nanaimo?
Well,
I know that's a big one to ask.
I know,
But...
and like for me that circles back to like Sonnet. I've been reading a lot about codependency, and I'm like, have I been just trying to change Nanaimo when I need to change myself? And like Nanaimo, I have to accept Nanaimo for what it is. You know what I mean? And like not try to control things that I can't control. But I mean, I would say that. Well, I just think, okay, so like in schools, when I'm thinking schools, I'm thinking about bullying, right? Yeah. And in the song, I mentioned like we listened to Black teens talk about bullying, and we did, and because that has happened to young Black people in Nanaimo, and I know that from what some of my students, actually this term, my public speaking students talked about bullying, and how like there's Orange Shirt Day, and then the same people who like bullied you are wearing orange shirts, right? Yeah. And as long as the teacher's not around or the parent's not around, it's still gonna happen. Yeah. And so I've been trying to think about that, because even, you know, as English lit profs, we read Jane Eyre. Like Jane Eyre's brother bullied her, and that didn't have anything to do with race. So the ways that people test their power and, you know, use social exclusion and all of those kinds of things to just find people to feel better than, maybe is kind of age old. But I think giving the tools to the people who are inclined to bystand or don't know what to do, right? That like a lot of love and a lot of genuine acknowledgement that Black history is our history, that Indigenous history is the history of this place, that those stories, I think, makes racial bullying in particular like that much more able to name, and able to just be like, dude, like, don't be such a douche, like that one could respond with that a little bit more easily when there's genuine appreciation for people, and just you know, for being Black, or for being like, for speaking Arabic, or for wearing hijab, and like for a culture that celebrates all of that means that there's just so much balance to dip into and to like swim in of good things and genuine love and appreciation and support for when hurt people and people who are just like emotionally not doing so well use bullying to try to gain you know, social security for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's a very specific instance,
Mm-hmm.
but that's yeah, that really has been part of my journey with the music and everything, is just like all of those people that were like, love is the answer, and that you cannot fight hate with hate, you have to fight. Like I soaked in the, like, I do not fucking get that
Mm-hmm.
for
Mm-hmm.
the longest time, because love wasn't doing it for me.
Yeah.
But that is directly just a lack of the kinds of positive, validating reflections of me and assertions of my worth that were not there, right?
Yeah.
So the more that those assertions are there, the better we can do. And that just means like that the city of Nanaimo invited me to speak is part of that. And like the more we invite Black people to come, and the more that I also think the truth part of the truth and reconciliation thing, like the more that we, and that's also in the song too, right? This is not Nanaimo if we're speaking Hulkaminam. This is Nanaimo territory that we're on, and the ways in which my day-to-day does not include as much like joyful contact with like a Nanaimo, you know, lots of different Nanaimo people, just being Nanaimo and like maybe even speaking Hulkaminam around me is I would, if we had more of that too, it would make it good for everyone, because anti-Black racism and like I don't want to collapse all the racisms, but in my own youthful experience, I was like, this, you bullying me on the playground, person, or you like telling me to go home, means that this is somehow about you thinking this is your home to police.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
And somehow I am not a part of what you think is your territory, your space to defend. And naming a space like Vancouver instead of Musqueam is that violence. And all of that consciousness, it's not even consciousness raising, it's just getting out of denial. Let's do that. Let's do that.
I mean, definitely that relationship between settler colonialism and bullying isn't maybe made as prominent as it should be in these so-called, you know, important but campaigns, that there's a long history of this that maybe should be connected more for kids, but clearly for adults as well. With that in mind, you also mentioned in the song that Nanaimo is small town in its self-perception. And I was just dying to ask you about that, because from various conversations I've had with you, I think it's interesting to think about what small town means. Like, that can be a derogatory thing. It can potentially be really positive, or also lead to some really interesting possibilities that the so-called large town, and a large town isn't always cosmopolitan, to be clear, but you know, a larger town, there's always this assumption that a big city is where all the positive things can happen. So, you know, there's potentially ambivalence in that, thinking about what is a small town. But you do say it's in its self-perception. So I'm just wondering if you could say just a little bit more about that before, and then I'll stop grilling you on the song.
Okay. You broke up just a little bit at the end. So when you said, and then I didn't hear that.
Oh, I'll stop grilling you about this particular song.
Oh, okay. No. I mean, it's my first opportunity to talk about it, because usually I'm talking about my poetry. So to talk about a song is like next level. It is a milestone. Yeah, it's great. Well, I guess I left like your close reading of that line to say that there's like the possibility of reading that with the positivity of like people knowing each other, people taking care of each other, a kind of friendliness
Mm-hmm.
and a kind of like warmth that's not there in the like elbows out kind of attitude of big cities is part of what I experience here. And then the like yeah, oh yeah, like, you know, referring to the mayor by his first name and then referring to like this guy by his first name and this woman by their first, like, and it's just, and everybody basically hangs out, it feels
Yeah.
like I think of Mindy Kaling, there's a title of her book, is everybody hanging out without me? Like in big cities, I don't worry about that, but then once you know the people who like think of themselves as like having exclusive parties, I guess, or like domestic professional networks in town, and you realize that there's one or two, who knows how many it is,
Yeah.
or that and like that within a couple of years of just being a prof and like going to a few open mics, like I feel like I can go out and people are like, hi Sonnet, they're like, hi Sonnet at Starbucks, they're like, hi Sonnet on the street, and
That's interesting. I didn't know
that's like
that.
that's it feels very small town. So
Mm-hmm.
there's that, and like the what I would, I guess, is cronyism. I don't know how to, it's just everybody, I'm not even used to it, I'm still learning. You know, I was born in Toronto, I grew up in like KW, which I was just too young to know what it to know adult small town ways of being. My parents, I lived the like, you know, child of immigrants, child of French Canadian, like people just kind of holding up in their own little space in
Mm.
KW, and not really, they didn't engage with the politics of the town.
Mm.
So maybe it's just that vantage point of
Mm-hmm.
being at a certain age in a certain position to
Mm-hmm.
experience society, Nanaimo
Yeah.
society.
Yeah. I think
Everybody
the
knows.
notion of small is being like kind of investigated in a range of ways these days, right? Like even with COVID impacting us in various ways and us having to shrink our bubbles, but also thinking about the global market economy and what does it mean to support smaller businesses and local economies. And so obviously there's a lot of negative baggage associated with small mindedness, of course, and all kinds of problems that are associated with that. And yet also so much potential. And you know, there's a lot of folks in Nanaimo, I think, that want to keep the city small, like in terms of development, but also like look at development from a perspective that will be good for the environment, good for our mental health. And as you've pointed out, like COVID-19's put us in that position where we've had to be really self-reflective about our physical health, our mental health, our spiritual health, and all of that. So I am curious to see, I suppose, what the Reimagine Nanaimo campaign is going to come up with in terms of thinking about how to deal with the small, like to build on that in a good way and keep it, but also to expand it, because we definitely need that diversity that you're talking about, and sort of multiracial participation in building up a different version of Nanaimo, I guess. Now you've talked a bit about COVID-19 already right at the beginning of the interview. But I do want to come back to this because it's a question of how has it impacted your thinking about how to live in this world. And I know you've been really generous to share sort of how it's impacted you on a personal level. But I guess like if you're imagining the post-COVID world, what do you think will come to be taken with you in terms of how you kind of think about people? We've seen a lot of conflict, a lot of violence in this last year or so in the world, a lot of suffering. And I'm just wondering, you know, we've also had a lot of reflection. So what do you hope will be carried forward post this time, and how is it kind of shaped? Do you think it's shaped how you think about conflict in the world?
Wow.
And this isn't the final word on it, so don't worry. This is all tentative thinking. Don't I won't hold you to any of it.
Well, I do think that it has changed changed how we experience borders in a way,
Mm.
right? that that nature, right, that are like embodied presence in the global ecosystem or ecosystems is a fact that we deal with, and that geopolitical nation and border is kind of this way of policing safety and power. Maybe, I mean, I guess it always has been, but maybe for people in like settler consciousness in Canada, there's been a kind of sense of safety within the Canadian nation, right? I mean, obviously, as from my writing, you know that I've constantly been interrogating that sense of safety, but it feels like, I mean, we also have just come out of like this 4-year period of intense weirdness from political leadership of one of the most, if not the most powerful country in the world. So that too meant that we were experiencing border in this very like kind of like distancing way, while at the same time experiencing our inability to deny our interconnectedness. So I think those repercussions of the inarguable connectedness of individual bodies and contact, our sense of what contact is, has changed, and then also our sense of how we police each other has changed, right? There's more, there's a different kind of comfort with snitching, right? We've also seen, I don't know about you, but I've seen people behave in ways that revealed their character in ways that wouldn't have been revealed had we not lived through this. So it's hard for me to say like that was positive or negative, but those are kind of the dimensions of socialness, social being, and connectedness, and that I think have been impacted, and that I think artists, I guess, and people who might return to practices that have traditionally been about promoting unity, creating shared experience, creating identity, creating culture in sustaining ways, will be maybe addressing those themes more. Does that answer your question?
I think it's an impossible question to answer in a way. So I think it's really about like meditating on it, right? So you've given me lots to think about. And I guess like the thing is this unpredictability too, right? Like it's so, everything about the last couple of years, and this year in particular, to me anyway, has been about unpredictability and sitting with a discomfort in unpredictability. And I guess that's the thing is sort of exciting and frightening, is the post COVID times, when or if they come, is like, there's so many unpredictable things. Like I worry about having the carrying over of that anxiety around contagion afterwards, like how will that play out? I hope that I'll respond to this world with greater love, and only want to connect with people more. But yeah, there's going to be a lot unfolding in the aftermath of this that it's really hard to know. Okay, so for the last question, completely change the mood. You are known to have a good karaoke party, and And which I am kind of really impressed by, because I think sometimes musicians might not want to go down the karaoke road, but you are also full of humor, and you I think you know how to have a good time with karaoke, right? It's not just about the serious performance on stage. And so I'm wondering if you could invite three people public people, I suppose, that we might know, to a karaoke party. Who might they be and why?
Oh man,
It's hard, I know.
this one was hard because all I could think of were like the people that I would really want to meet, and like, but do you want Stevie Wonder at your would you want Stevie Wonder at your karaoke? Because that would be intimidating, right? But I put Stevie Wonder.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if people won't necessarily know Claudia Rankine. I would want to see how she would karaoke.
Yeah.
There are a number of like very serious kind of high art women, or mainly women, femmes, that I would just want to see it. I just want to see, can they cut loose? Because they're like the hyper intellectualism. Yeah. I don't know. So I put her on there. And then I had Lillian Allen, maybe because Lillian Allen is going to come as our Gustafson, VIU's Gustafson poet this year. And plus, like, all of the things that we've been talking about, in a way, like joy, music, movement, form, language, and creating community, and like in response to pressures and like resilience, that is basically everything that her career has been about. And I feel like I'm just like really, I'm only really recently realizing what a treasure she's been. Like, she's always kind of been there in the background, and I knew that her work was there, but to dive into it when I'm ready, and that COVID made me ready, and I think COVID made a lot of people ready. I would just want Lillian Allen to be in the room, because she'd be like fun, and this, I would just feel like wisdom was like there in the room. Whenever she's been in the room, I have been in a room with her before, and yeah, she's good vibes.
You know, it's not impossible to do live stream karaoke sessions as social events. I'm just throwing it out there, but who knows, right? I'll make sure to put the Gustafson information on the website as well, in accompaniment with this interview, so people can check out that info if they want to see Lillian Allen's speaking, which is coming up pretty soon. Favorite song when you do karaoke, as a final thought on that karaoke scene?
I like Sir Duke.
Okay.
Which is Stevie Wonder. Yeah.
Head springing.
I like to sing the horn part too. Like, actually, that's the most fun part. The horns get all the fun in that song.
The horns get all the fun. Well, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for taking. I know you're such a busy person these days, and so thank you so much for taking the time to share this with us. And I look forward to hearing more songs from you and reading more poetry, and one day being in a room with you again.
Right. Yeah. We look forward to that too. Thanks so much for inviting me to talk with you in this really cool series.
The pleasure is all mine. Okay. Bye-bye.